at this point? Lori?
They are, and I can unmute them.
That's okay. I think because we got a lot of ground to cover, it'll probably work best just to go ahead and we'll leave questions and answers to the end. So let me go ahead and get right into the presentation. And we're going to be doing two things. Yeah, we're going to be doing part of what we'll be doing will be a very small couple of slides just to show the agenda, and most of the time is going to be spent on actual applications. So for the agenda today, there's basically 5 points. What is SAGE fixed assets? How does SAGE fixed assets depreciation work? That's going to be demonstrations. What about integration? For those that are on SAGE 100, formerly known as MAS 90, and want to integrate to the SAGE fixed asset module, I will be showing how that works. And so we're getting into the demonstration, and then once we're done with the demonstrations, we'll circle back for Q&A and a follow-up with Lori on some of the things that are happening with the SAGE products. So what is SAGE fixed assets? A lot of people don't know that SAGE fixed assets is actually a family of applications, of which the SAGE asset accounting, called SAGE fixed asset depreciation, is the primary component. But there's also SAGE fixed asset tracking, which would be useful for those that want to not only manage what assets they own or are tracking, but what's the disposition of the assets. So SAGE tracking can be used as an inventory of assets, and it includes features for doing physical counts and assigning where assets are located, and even in the case of things like laptops, if you want to have assets that are checked out and due to be returned on a specific date. And then there's a final component called SAGE fixed assets planning, which is really for CIP, or construction in progress, and tracking projects that you're putting together that will become large capital expenses. You want to establish budgets and then track expenses against your budgets. Then once that project is complete, you want to convert it to a capital asset that may or may not be depreciated. Then it will tie together with the SAGE fixed assets depreciation module. So they all work together. They all share the same database if you're using them, and they can all be used individually. So how does SAGE fixed asset depreciation work? It can be run independent of an ERP system, which means that you can buy SAGE fixed assets as a standalone application for tracking assets. It's sold at various levels depending on the number of assets that you want to maintain and how many users that you want to have that get involved with assets. So you can have anywhere from 50 to 100 assets all the way up to hundreds of thousands of assets in your organization. And then for those that are using SAGE 100, there's a pretty decent integration that would be a two-way integration that allows you to both record new assets through the purchases and also update general ledger with the appropriate journal entries when you run depreciation. And that's what I'll be showing here directly. So I'll be reviewing the screen as far as any the chat window in case some questions or if some issues come up as far as the transmission difficulties. But I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay at this point in time and can see my screen. So what I've opened up is the SAGE fixed assets. This is basically the main screen. When you log into fixed assets, you're going to see a list of the company assets. There is a really nice little screen, though, that you can see when you first log in, if you want to, called the Asset Snapshot. And this can be optionally turned on, that when you launch the product, it'll show you a snapshot of your overall position in your assets. So like this first tab that we're looking at is in service by quarter. investment by remaining life, acquisition comparison or depreciation comparison. And there's some really handy information as far as top-level information of the status of your assets in your company as a whole. And it's broken down into some sections, like some graphs on the right-hand side, net asset value on the left-hand side, and active assets by property type on the left-hand side. So I say that's an optional little screen that you can see upon login. So what we've got is a table which shows a listing of the assets. It's in sort of a grid format, so you can slide your bar left and right to see additional information about the assets. So this is called the main screen. And on the left-hand screen, since we're working with assets, we've got some tasks that we can do, like adding an asset, importing assets. If we wanted to customize something, we could do that. Or on the left-hand side, we could say, look at our asset screen. We could look at reports. So this will open up an access to the reports, which is a very powerful function of the asset program. So I'll go back to the assets, and we'll delve into a little bit about what we're looking at here. So the first thing, this is a list of assets, and it can be it can show all the assets that you have, or you can easily group them according to subgroups to make it easier to identify just selected assets. First thing what we're looking at is we have various columns that represent some of the key information about the assets. So the first column that we see here is the system number. Now that is something that is automatically assigned by the system. It's an internal ID that whenever you add a new asset, a system number will be automatically assigned, and it will be how internally all transactions or records that go with that asset are maintained. In addition, you can assign an asset ID. So I'm going to highlight the asset ID column right here. And in addition, you can say you want your asset ID to be the first thing that you look at. I can easily move my columns around to put them in the order that is important to me. And this is defined by user. So the asset ID number can be used for an internal number that you would like to use as a way of cataloging your items, especially if you want to generate things like labels. So that you want to print out an asset label or an asset tag, which is more informational than just a system ID number. So, and the use of those is optional. And then we've got location, and if we click on the top of any particular column, we can resort according to that column. So that's a pretty standard convention when you're working with Windows applications. So here I'm sorting by location. I could easily sort. I could easily sort or select on any of the pieces of information. And if I didn't want to see everything, because maybe I've got several thousand assets, well then I can real easily just group my assets. Like right now I'm looking at all active assets, but for example, let's say I just want to see assets that were acquired before June of 2010. So if I would click on that, that's going to resort my assets according to a predetermined selection. Or if I just wanted to see, say, high-value assets, and high value I've got determined to be anything over, say, $1 million. So it's real easy to group your assets, and if you want to edit a group, real easily click on an edit function. And this high-value assets I've got here, if I wanted to edit that, right now it's saying that the acquisition value is greater than $1 million. Well, let's say I just want to make it anything that's greater than $20,000. And I can add multiple selection criteria as far as fields. And then if I want to determine a different way of sorting these, I could say I want to add if they're $20,000 and let's say I want to sort them by any of the fields here. Let's just say I want to sort them by location. Click OK, close. Now I've gone from one asset that was over $1 million to 19 assets. If you look up here in the right-hand corner, it tells me how many assets are in group. 19 assets for that are over $20,000. So that's as far as working with the assets. They make it real easy to do that. But another thing is, let's say here we've got locations. We've got Atlanta, Irvine, and New York. And if we go across the screen, notice we're working with about 15 or 20 fields of information that could be useful to us, things like the owner, the quantity, a replacement value, a warranty date. All of these fields are customizable, and you can determine which fields that you need to see. So if I go into Customize Fields, here's a list of all the fields. And if there's a field that's showing up that's not being used, like for example, if I didn't want to have, I don't use something called an owner, I can just go ahead and hide that field, and that would remove it from my list of columns. Okay? Or if I wanted to customize some fields, and let's say we added a new location, I could click on my location, and fields can be set up so that they can have data that's entered directly, or they can be set up where you've got a smart list, which is a multiple choice of what goes into the fields. If I open up my smart list manager, you can see I've got Atlanta, Houston, Irvine, York. Let's say I wanted Cincinnati in there. And I might want to spell it correctly. And having a description to go along with it is optional if I want to click Add. So now I've got a new field that I've added called Cincinnati. And as far as when I'm working with fields, I can have them so that entry is required or not required. I can have it where you can add new, the person that is doing entry could add to the list as they go along, or restrict the list. So this one, it says my entry options, I've restricted the entry list, and I don't want to automatically add it. I want a manager to add the new location. If I click Close, then I've got Cincinnati that's now available if I go to add a new asset. So that kind of covers the general information if I'm looking at assets as a group. I've got my if I want to generate some reports on that asset, I've got a list of standard reports. There's about 25 standard reports that the system generates. You can have reports that are done by batch. So let's say I've got a month-end processing batch as we have here. The month-end processing batch consists of 4 reports that I want to run when I do my month-end, so that I don't have to run them individually. I can just run them in a batch. And I can also have favorite reports that I like to run regularly, like expense by location. And if I wanted to run the report from here, I can just run and edit. I can tell it which group I want to run it on. Let's say I wanted to do my high-value assets, and I want to base my information on the internal book that I'm using for the reporting period of 5/31. I want to run it to the window and run the report. So it's real easy to run the report. As with most of the Sage products, it's Crystal Reports that's generating the report behind the scenes. These fixed asset reports are fairly sophisticated reports because they're generating information from a fairly large database, but as you can see, it's pretty easy to get to them. And then if you're using the version of Sage fixed assets with the report writer, you also have the ability to go and do custom versions of reports, which would be using Crystal Reports. I'll go back to my asset list. Well, so let's say now I want to work with a specific asset. If I happen to know a system number, I could enter the system number and click on Go. and it would bring me to that system number, right? I go back to a different group, let's say active assets. So now I'm looking at 77 assets. I don't know what my asset number is, but let's say I do know that a description contains Durango. Well, I've got one asset that happens to be a Durango. It's a Durango SUV, so let's take a closer look at that. So now I've gone into the individual asset detail screen, and this is where the information that gets entered when you want to put a new asset into service or record a new asset. This is the panel that gets entered with the data. So here's all the columns that we saw on the previous screen. They now all relate to the records that I see here. And so the asset class, you can see that. The general ledger asset information, so every record has an asset account, accumulated account, and a GL expense account for depreciation. These fields can be optional or can be required. I've got the record complete as being a required field. Now this field is something that I added after this record was created, so there wasn't a value here. Let's just say I want to mark that as complete. So at the top of the screen, basically we're looking at what's called the common information or general information. These are optional fields, and they can be used for your individual assets as they apply. For example, if there's a model number or a department or a vendor where they came from, well, those fields may not apply to every asset. But as part of the setup, you determine what types of information you want to track about your individual assets. Then you can choose the appropriate values for the fields that you want to use, and you can hide fields that you don't want to use. The second part that we're looking at is underneath the general information is what we call the book, what's called the book information. And the book information shows the acquisition date. And there's 5 required fields for assets that you want to depreciate that need to be filled in. And depreciation is based on, the depreciation calculations will be based on information in these fields. So here we've got the property type, placed in service date, which doesn't have to be the same as the acquisition date, and depreciation will be calculated from the placed in service date. The acquisition value, the depreciation method that you want to use, and there's I forget how many valid methods of depreciation. There's like 50-some depreciation methods that you can select from. So here's a list of all of them. Now it depends on, these depreciation methods change as the IRS laws change. So one of the things that SAGE does is they stay on top of what changes the government is making, and then they make the appropriate changes on a periodic basis in the software. And those changes are all included as part of your annual subscription. So you fill out the information for the top 5 fields, and then you've got about 8 fields that are optional that can apply depending on the type of asset you're acquiring, such as a 179 deduction or a 168 allowance. Whether there's a beginning date, which would apply if you're converting from another asset system, where you're going to import maybe your assets into the SAGE fixed asset system, and you're going to have the beginning date. Since you've already calculated depreciation on your previous system, you're going to give it an established beginning date for starting depreciation with SAS for the new system, so it'll carry forward. Normally, these would be blank on records that you're starting from scratch. And then you have about 9 fields down below that are in blue. Those are in blue because those are fields that you can't edit, because they're calculated automatically by the system, and they're automatically updated as you use the system for depreciation. So for example, we have the current through date, which shows me I've depreciated this asset through May of 2010, my current year-to-date depreciation, my current accumulated depreciation for the asset, the net book value, and then a period close date if I was doing period closes in the asset system. So these are all say calculated fields that you wouldn't expect to change, and they automatically get updated when we enter the system. And when we add new assets, we can apply templates, so a lot of these values are filled out automatically. So the way I've got my system set up right now, and we'll see this in the part 2 of the demo when I get to the demonstration, is when I choose when I put in a new asset in my accounts payable, I can pick which template I want to use from my Sage system, the fixed asset module, and then it'll automatically populate a lot of the information because of the values I have saved in the template. And there's really no limit to the number of templates that you use other than a practical limit of keeping track of them. So we've covered general informational fields. We've covered book information, part of which are required and part of which are calculated. And so that's what we're going to circle back around to this screen again, but for right now, that's I want to go back and show, okay, well, since we're talking about using this for depreciation of our assets, the next step is let's figure out how depreciation is run. While I'm on this screen on the left-hand side, you can see there's some things I can do by like adding a new asset. If I want to calculate depreciation, I can actually calculate depreciation on a specific asset, or I could run a quick projection. I am going to show that based on my internal book, and a quick projection will just show me what my depreciation will be the next span of a few years. So there's some real handy information that's available from this screen. I'll go back to my assets list. And what I want to do is I want to pick a group of assets that were acquired before 6 of 2010, because I've got a few assets with my demo system that are past then, and my accounting system is set up for June of 2010 also. So let's just say I want to go ahead and depreciate these assets. Now you can do them by group, you can do them by company. Your database, when you set up your asset system, you can have multiple databases, or you can have one database with multiple companies. And if you're using integration, you can tie, your ERP company to, to your fixed asset company. In this case, I've got one company. I'm going to depreciate, and I'm going to go ahead and select all books. Now, by books, you can use tax and internal. The system allows 7 books that you can actually use, but you don't have to use them all. It's defined on a company by basis. And let's say I want to depreciate through 6 of 2010, because my last depreciation was through May of 2010. Right? So I want to update the current reporting period, and I want to send the results to the window. So I'm going to go ahead and click the preview. So what's generated is, for this month, it's generated my depreciation expense report, which basically lists everything, itemization for all the assets that were in this depreciation run. I've got acquired value, my depreciation method, my 168 allowance, my depreciable basis, the last prior through depreciation, and my accumulation of depreciation amount. So this is an expense report. I could print that out, save it for records, right? Then another report that you'd want to run, and this would be if you were not integrated to the ERP system, or you were tying to a different ERP system than the Sage system. I'm going to go to my standard reports. I'll go ahead and bring up the general ledger posting report. Now I'm just using the I'm just using the internal book for posting to the general ledger, so I'm going to go ahead and run the report based on the internal book. This should show me a recap of the general ledger postings based on the expense depreciation that we did. I expand this so we can see it. Based on our GL accounts, here's our depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation. So you can see this is a pretty simplistic entry as far as our general ledger goes, but it can be as lengthy as you're tracking your as your breakdown is in your general ledger. One of the things we can also do is, if needed, even though I've run depreciation for June now, and if I go back to my asset, my Durango asset, which happened to be asset number 18, open asset 18, we'll see that now my current through date is June of 2010. But if for whatever reason we need to go back and recalculate depreciation for a prior month and then bring something new going forward and maybe make some general ledger adjusting entries appropriately, there is no restriction on going back and doing that as far as the system allowing us through the proper permissions to recalculate depreciation for either prior months, prior periods, or even prior years, and then recalculate it going forward. I know with some systems that's not as flexible. So I'm not going to recalculate depreciation on this. It's been done, so I don't need to do it again. And I've got my information that I need to post to my general ledger, and from here I could run any reports that I want to run. Like if I want to run my fixed asset summary, which shows the depreciation for current date, or say I want to run it for my assets for 2010. So here's an asset summary report for that, showing similar information that was on the expense report, all this current year-to-date expense and total accumulated depreciation. So I'm not going to show every report because there's a long list of reports that are available. But I've got reports that are available for internal or external, AMT, sales of property taxes, ITC, if I've got assets involved in ITC, right? So another report we created, expense by location. I'll just show that real quick. I say it's similar information, just narrowing it down to looking at it a different way for maybe a different department head or a different stakeholder. So now that I'm on my asset 18, as I mentioned, I said we'd be coming back to this screen because we've only seen part of the information that's being maintained about a specific asset. For every asset, indefinitely, if there's transactions that would include disposals or transfers, they would show up in the transaction list. If we've got notes about the asset that we wanted to track, we could add new notes. We can edit existing notes. If we happen to have some images, like if I wanted to have an image about this asset, I can store that. Or let's say we've got documents that we want to track, like the PO that created the asset in the first place. Here's an example of a PDF of a purchase order that was created, and it's stored for that specific asset. And then anything that touches the asset, running depreciation, closing a period, a history record is created so that you've got a history of what went on with this asset. And if I went into detail, I could go into my detail and see a detail of each of that asset, what happened, who the user was, and what the source application was. So here you can see I've got some applications that came from some transactions, history that came from depreciation. I also got something that came from tracking, which is the other companion product to the fixed asset family of products. Now, on this asset, if I wanted to dispose of the asset, I could just simply go over to click on a disposal. It'll prompt me for a disposal date, a disposal method, whether it was a partial disposal, what the cash proceeds were, if there was expenses related to the sale, and it'll come up and calculate my disposal information. And I could run at the end of the month, I could run my disposal report for all my disposals, and that would give me the information I would need for a general ledger journal entry for disposals. And we can do the same thing for transfers. I want to transfer, I can transfer from one location to another location, or I can transfer from one company to another company as well. A complete history is maintained on both the transferred item and the location it was transferred to and the location it was transferred from. Also, if you have at least the Sage Fixed Asset Standard or above, you can do partial transfers, or which would come into play. It's real handy if, let's say, you accumulated 10 laptops. You're treating them as one basically big asset, and you needed to transfer 5 of them to another location. You could do a partial transfer and say you're transferring 5 assets out of the 10 that you bought. So we've covered, the functionality as far as, the ability to do transfers, to do depreciation. If I'm working with my asset list, I want to go to assets. I want to work with a group. Let's say I've got a group of records not complete, for example. Here's just 2 assets I've got where I've got my record complete as flagged as no, meaning that there's additional information that I need to enter before I want to consider this record as being fully entered. I can update fields based on a group. Like if right now all these 2 assets, one belongs in Atlanta and one belongs to Houston. And let's say I wanted to in bulk update. Let's say I want to update a general ledger account on both of these items to a different value. Well, I can do bulk updates using just the group manager and search and replace. So that's a pretty handy function. So kind of covered the asset list, the individual assets, other housekeeping information. As I said, you can have multiple companies. If you want to edit your company information, or when you create a new company, there's a company maintenance screen, and fill out the information that's pertinent to that particular company. If you've got short years, what your year end is. If you're on a fiscal calendar versus a regular calendar year, and so there's a lot of flexibility built in there. And if you're on the Sage premium fixed asset premium version, it does allow you to go ahead and set up your individual period end months for your fiscal calendars as well. For those that are going to start using fixed assets, and maybe the CPA has been doing them in the past, but your company's grown, you want to start doing depreciations in-house, there's numerous help features built into the software. I think there's actually something like 100,000 help points that you can get from within the application. So there's online help, you've got the user guide, the links guide, but there's also a real handy depreciation fundamentals document that actually is like a little mini course that you can take for self-paced. It actually talks about the fundamentals of depreciation, the types of depreciation available, rules behind legislation and regulation. And so that's just a built-in function that gets updated every year as rules change. You get to it right from your system help screen. And then it's going along with the company information as well. When I want to start up, I'm not using fixed assets, so I don't have any assets in there. How do I start up? When you start your company from scratch, and start using assets from scratch, you have the option of either manually entering assets individually, or you also have the ability to import assets from an Excel or like a CSV file. So if you can export your assets from your old fixed asset system, format it in columns such that the information that's needed to create new assets is available in those columns, then we can, there's built-in utilities to import the new assets. You don't have to buy something extra to do that. So that kind of, it's kind of a quick run through, but it's an overview of the Sage fixed assets module if you're running it without being integrated to an ERP system. I'm going to catch my breath here just for a second. I'm going to switch over to another screen, which is my SAS 90 screen. I'm going to go back to a different group of assets here. Assets before that. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to open up Sage. Now, I'm using the Sage 2013, so this might be a little bit, the screen might not be quite as familiar for some of you that haven't seen the 2013 version yet. This is just one of the new look and feel of the system. But what I want to show is I want to show how integration works. It's a two-way integration, and by two-way integration, meaning that when I put a purchase into my ERP system, a Sage 100 accounts payable or purchase order, and that purchase happens to be for an item that's also an asset, then the end result of posting my invoice will be a new asset created in my Sage fixed asset database. And when I run depreciation in Sage fixed asset, and I want to do a period end for that in my ERP system, the end result will be my depreciation general ledger journal entry made for me automatically. So I'm going to run through that real quickly. So if I go into enter invoice, now once you click on the invoice function from my new workflow that they've provided, the function is the same as what you're used to from the normal invoice data entry function. So let's say I'm going to Office Max, got an invoice number. Invoice amount, let's say it's $3,300.22. So I'm just going to tag it as office furniture in general. My GL account that I'm going to post it to is going to be an asset account. So I'm going to make it furniture and fixtures for Houston. You notice my asset account for Houston is set, so I'm going to select that. And now you notice that the asset template column is selected. It's asking me to pick an asset template, and this is one of the options, whether you're going to use an asset template or not. And I'm going to say, yep, I want to use my Houston assets template for that. I'm going to distribute my full amount. Do that. Now you notice that I'm also taking advantage of some of the other features of custom office in the ERP system. In addition to my general ledger account template for the asset, my comment, you're all familiar with the three of those, the general ledger account, the amount, and the comment. I want to add some additional information that's going to impact my assets. So let's just say, the manufacturer, I don't know, Broyhill. The model number, the model number doesn't apply, serial number. So in this case, really the only thing that applies for this particular piece of asset is maybe the manufacturer. So if there was a warranty date, let's say there was a computer desk or a set of computer desks that had a warranty date, I could probably apply a warranty date on that too. Make it let's make it 2011. That's okay. So I've distributed that asset. I won't add any more assets in order to keep this moving along. Go ahead and update my invoice. So this would be a familiar screen for everybody that's used to using Mass 90. Notice we've got the GL account, the furniture and fixtures, right? The accounts payable invoice register recap. Let's say yes to update. But you're going to see a new report that is going to come into play because this knows it's an asset, and this is my asset template report. So this shows that I've got my invoice number, the template that was used, the vendor number, and then some costing information that was created. And it says the number of assets created was 1. And so it's showing us that we've added a new asset to our system. Now, since we've got some additional fields of information available to us through Custom Office, I could have some of those fields also show up on our report here. So go ahead and say yes to print the daily transaction register. And we're done. So now I mentioned that a two-way integration should include, if I purchase an asset, it'd be nice if the asset shows up in my asset information system. So if I were to go to my assets, if I look at the bottom of the list, let's just say for Houston, where are you? Active assets. You notice I've generated asset number 92. But my information isn't complete, so I've got it defaulting where it says record complete is no. That's a little internal flag that I've got that once I've, even though we've created a new asset, we've populated the fields that the template has told us to populate. Well, there's some fields that you may not know of before you create the asset, but the integration is set up to record just a set number of fields. So it's going to record the acquisition value, like we have down here. It recorded the placed in service date. And because I'm using a template, it grabs some information as far as the general ledger account numbers. But you notice it didn't populate the vendor. If there was a purchase order number, it didn't do that. Some of these other fields, like if there was the invoice date, the warranty date. So even though this is integrated, it does require user intervention to come to update the information based on what other piece of information are you tracking for that asset. So what most companies do is have an assets form that would say maybe be a new asset form, which is something the system does allow you to generate. And typically what companies do is if they have an invoice, they also have an asset form that goes along with it with the values that need to be entered into the fixed asset system. So, and if you're only doing a couple assets a week or several assets a month, that's not that big of a deal to turn around and update these values. But there is another method for sort of rounding out this two-way integration. I'm going to go ahead and hop over to that. Now. So I'm going to go back to my Sage. When we created that new asset, there's some history that's created about the asset. So if I were to use a Crystal report to create an asset purchase detail report, I could get additional information about that asset and have it in the form of a report. So let's say I want to see assets that I purchased from let's say May 1st of 2010 through June 30th of 2010. Well, here you can see, I'll make this a little bit bigger so everybody can see it. Here you can see that the system number is automatically created, the vendor number, the name, the account number that was used, the asset template, the unit cost, the total cost. Now these are fields that I've kind of chosen at random, but the invoice date, the purchase order number, comment text, the manufacturer, the model number, the serial number, the warranty date. These are all fields of information that I've added to my accounts payable system so I can capture this without having to re-enter it manually. So given that I've got this information, then it seems like the next logical step would be to export that data to a spreadsheet, and then rather than having to re-enter the information by hand, I can just update my existing fixed assets by using a company utility for importing information on existing assets. So not only can I import new assets to start, I can also update fields on existing assets. So if I was purchasing a lot of assets on a weekly or monthly basis, I would probably set this up to eliminate a lot of re-entry by capturing the information either in an Excel spreadsheet or in my ERP system, and then just manually importing that data to update it and save a lot of typing. So it just depends on what works for your company. So we've done our depreciation for June. We've added some new assets to our system. So we've seen one way of the two-way integration. So there's one final thing I want to show here, and that's in the fixed asset module. I know a lot of you have seen this fixed assets menu, but it doesn't really do anything unless you've got the fixed assets module for integration. So there's some setup to go through to tell it what company that this fixed asset company is applying to. But what I'm going to jump into is go into period end processing. Go to my material book. It should be looking for information for June of 2010 because last time I closed my period end in the fixed assets in here was in May. So I click on proceed. My date, I want to use maybe 6/30 as my accounting date. I go ahead and print my document. Here's the fixed assets journal. So this is a detailed journal showing the expense account and the expense account number that's being touched. So that's a detail report. If I want to update, I'm going to say yes. Now it's saying the period end will proceed to July. That's okay. Period end processing complete. What it's also then done is, you notice it's done my fixed assets transaction register. So this is my general ledger journal entry that results from my depreciation run. And there's my general ledger transaction journal. So you can imagine if this was 40 or 50 pages of typing that you don't have to do, that's pretty slick. So if I go ahead and close this, I can update my transaction register. So I've run my depreciation in Sage Fixed Asset module. I've posted it using the integration features within Sage 100. So we've pretty much closed the loop for the two-way integration, and that actually concludes the demonstration portion of what I had planned to show. So I'm going to turn it back to Lori, and we'll open up the screen for some Q&A and some other announcements to go on. Lori, are you there?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Very faintly.
Very faintly?
That's better.
Hi. Is that better? I wanted to just open it up for questions. I have unmuted everyone. So you are free to ask Alan any questions or have him show something else that you may want to see in more detail or have a question about. If there are no questions, we'll go ahead and just wrap it up. I wanted to make everyone aware that there is a virtual conference that SAGE holds on an annual basis. This year it's on Wednesday, August 28th, sorry, and it is open to SAGE customers, people that are interested in the fixed asset solution, and to business partners like Socius. It's free, and we would be happy to send you over the information if you are interested. So please just let us know, let one of us know, or put a comment in the chat, and we will be sure to get you the information. And lastly, we wanted to just make sure that you have our contact information. I have listed Alan's information on the screen, and also Kim Kosar will be following up with everybody to see if you have an interest in seeing fixed assets or getting more information or pricing or anything on the software. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us, and like I said, Kim will be following up with you guys. Well, I wanted to thank everyone, and if that's it, we will go ahead and let you get back to work. Thank you.